Thank you for being here. I am Stefania Petrosillo. I am the Policy Officer of EUROPARC Federation, and I will introduce the webinar for you. And then I will leave the floor to my colleagues to continue. So, thank you very much for being here. As I said, it's not the best day today, we know, but it's also a nice way to conclude the year, to speak about sea, and maybe to dream a little bit on our holidays in summer. Okay, the PowerPoint yesterday was working perfectly, and today, of course, doesn't want to change slides. One moment, so typical. We start again. Fantastic. You know, this is so typical, so no panic. That's always.
Sorry, Stefania, if you want, I can share my screen.
I think that...
Give it another try, please.
Yes, I'm trying again. Okay, perfecto. Okay.
Yeah, there we are.
It's okay. So, we are here today to speak about marine. As I said, I'm Stefania Petrosillo, Policy Officer of the Federation of EUROPARC, and I'm based in Brussels. EUROPARC, if someone of you doesn't know very well what EUROPARC is the Federation of Protected Areas, so national parks, regional parks, marine protected areas, and Natura 2000 sites. We have different offices in Europe, and the headquarters is in Regensburg. We have several national or international sections, and we work on natural protection, but also on different topics connected with natural protection and sustainable development. If you want to know more about our federation, please join us in our main event, that is the EUROPARC conference. This year will be in Austria. We hope to have the conference in presence. We really want to meet again in presence. Here you can find all information about it. And to be updated and to know more about our organization, you can always follow EUROPARC in the social media and in the website. Some rules for today. We are recording this webinar, so if you have any problem of this, you can put your camera off, but it could be nice if you can leave your camera on, because it's very nice to see each other. Use the chat for questions. My colleagues Isa and Fernando will help me to collect the questions and to ask them to our speakers. And don't be afraid, everything, the record, the presentations, the report will be published in the next days in our website. So everything will be available for all of you and for other people that couldn't join us today. So again, thank you very much for being with us. And today, after me, we will have my colleague Isa, who will speak a little bit about the framework, the general framework of the EU policies connected with marine topics, and especially marine protected areas. And then we will have the two case studies, very interesting, about marine environment restoration. Time for questions and answers. And we will conclude the webinar, and we will wish you reciprocally Merry Christmas. The idea is to finish in 1 hour and a half. but this depends, of course, also about the interest of the people and the questions we will have. So again, thank you. And Isa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefania. So my name is Isa. I'm a policy assistant of EUROPARC for the last half year. And I'm also based in Brussels. And I will now share my screen. Yes. Okay, so today I will give a short overview of the tools that EUROPARC has available for marine protected area managers. Yeah, first of all, you might already know this one. It's the Marine and Coastal Knowledge Hub. Yeah, you can find it on our website here if you go to Knowledge Hub and then topics Marine and Coastal. And we have on there, we have case studies. So those are good practices, for example, on how to work together with stakeholders, but also how to set up a new MPA. There's some examples of it. Secondly, there's also other news and articles, like events that we are organizing or other organizations are organizing, and also articles on policy updates or other things that can be interesting. And we also have other resources, videos, and also our previous webinars. Yeah, so that can be nice. And one last thing is that you see on our website in the right-hand corner, you can select your language, and Google will automatically translate the text. And I think there's over 100 languages in there. So yeah, it can be nice. Then we also have something else new. A new web page is on marine policies. They can be found under policy, and then also marine policies are in the bar on the left. And I will just talk about a few here to give you some insights now. Yeah, the marine environment is sometimes it can be embedded within other policies, which is the case for the biodiversity strategy. The biodiversity strategy, you might have heard of it. It's part of the European Green Deal, which is a very large set of proposals of the European Commissions to reduce the greenhouse gases by at least 55% by 2030. And one of the strategies to do so is the biodiversity strategy. And one of the a few of the measures in there are to increase the marine protected areas, and also actually the terrestrial to 30%. And currently it's around 12, so there's still some work to do. And they want 10% of this to be strictly protected. And the exact definitions of this are still also to be defined. But we're currently, they say we're currently at 1%, so also quite a lot of work to do for the marine. And this all has to be in a coherent network of protected areas. Yeah, and it has to be managed well. So management has to be effective with clear defined conservation objectives and measures, and also appropriate monitoring. And then lastly, a last very interesting thing are the nature restoration targets. These are legally binding targets to restore degraded ecosystems, and in particular those who have the most potential to capture and store carbon, and also those that prevent and reduce the impact of natural disasters. We expected those nature restoration targets by the end of 2021, but unfortunately they're postponed to the next spring. So that's something to look forward to in the next year. Then something else is the European Maritime Fisheries and Agriculture Fund. This is a fund that mainly aims to achieve sustainable fisheries, but of course fisheries or sustainable fisheries at least, rely on healthy ecosystems. So this fund also facilitates the protection of marine biodiversity and ecosystems by creating and managing marine protected areas, but also by implementing the spatial protection measures established by the Marine Framework Directive. And this is a marine environmental policy. So yes, then there is one last tool that EUROPARC has, and that is Live Enable. It's a project led by EUROPARC with 7 other partners. It started last summer and it will run for 3 years, or it will last 3 years. And it aims to build practical nature management capacity among Natura 2000 and protected area managers. And in particular, those in the marine and actually also in the forest environment. So this is also something that we can look forward to in the next year. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I will give the floor back to Stefania. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isa. That was just a very short, concise presentation of the tools that EUROPARC has available for our members, for everybody who is interested in marine protection. So please check our website, ask for more questions. And also, if you want to have some specific questions, some specific information about the project manager, our colleague Neil McIntosh, is also here. So if you want, you can also contact him. And so feel free to ask, use the chat, and absolutely ask what you want to know, and also provide suggestions, ideas if you have, or other information. Use the chat as you prefer. Now I think it's time to listen the core, to arrive at the core of our webinar. So the 2 very interesting case studies. If I remember well, Isa, we decided that the first person will be Lorenzo. Is this correct? No, the first person will be Ines. Ines, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this webinar. I'm going to share my screen. And fingers crossed that this is going to work. So can you see my presentation full screen?
Yes.
Yes. Very well.
Okay, that's great. So again, thank you very much for inviting me. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the work we are doing within the project Life Adaptablus, which aims to promote the implementation of climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies based on the conservation and restoration of estuarine habitats. Human population tends to concentrate in coastal areas, with more than 60% of the world's population living in the coastal zone, despite that coastal zone is only 15% of the Earth's surface. Estuaries in particular have been focal points for human settlement and commerce, and host many large cities around the world. Coastal areas are exposed to impacts of climate change, such as sea level rise and storm events. And this combination of the exposure to climatic threats and the high urbanization and usage of coastal zones results in coastal areas being under a very high risk due to climate change. Estuaries and coastal areas contain different habitats like salt marshes, seagrass meadows, or tidal flats that distribute at different levels with regard to the tidal range, with tidal flats and seagrass meadows located at the lower intertidal zone and salt marshes located at the higher intertidal zone. And these habitats provide critical ecosystem services to coastal societies. ranging from the support of fisheries and biodiversity, nutrient cycling, and also cultural and recreational values. And also, they can play a critical role in climate change adaptation and mitigation through coastal protection and carbon sequestration. First, in the case of vegetated ecosystems like salt marshes and seagrass meadows, their canopy buffer the wave energy and currents, protecting coastal areas from erosion and also enhancing sedimentation. And also, both salt marshes and seagrass meadows are known to be significant CO2 sinks, carbon sinks, comparable to terrestrial forests. They are along mangrove forests in the tropics, the so-called group of blue carbon ecosystems, which is a term that is getting a great attention during the last decade. So this ecosystem sequesters CO2 through photosynthesis and transform it into biomass. And a large fraction of this biomass is allocated in the soil compartment as roots and rhizomes. Once in the soil, the lack of oxygen reduce its remineralization and enhance its preservation in the long term. In addition, these ecosystems are very efficient at enhancing particle sedimentation from the water column thanks to their canopy. So they can also trap organic particles that come from other ecosystems that is transported through the tides and the rivers, in the estuaries. As a consequence, and unlike in forest where most of the carbon is stored in the canopy or in aerial biomass, in coastal ecosystems, the largest carbon deposits are allocated in the soil compartment. So far, most efforts assessing carbon sequestration capacity in coastal ecosystems has been focused on vegetated ecosystems like seagrass and salt marshes. But tidal floods, despite they don't have, or they are depicted of vegetation, can also store carbon through the accumulation of particles from the water column, but still they have been neglected compared to other habitats. And finally, thanks to the accumulation of below ground biomass and detritus and organic and inorganic particles from the water column, the soil of these ecosystems tend to accrete vertically. So they this function confers this ecosystem a certain capacity to adapt to sea level rise. That's why conservation and restoration of these ecosystems has been or has started to be considered as a potential nature-based solution to climate change adaptation in coastal areas. However, and despite all the important ecosystem services these habitats provide, the intense use and urbanization of coastal areas and estuaries had significantly impacted estuarine habitats that had been traditionally desiccated and transformed to other uses. In Europe, for instance, it is estimated that 2/3 of coastal wetlands have been lost since 1900. The loss of these habitats lead to the loss of all the ecosystem services they provide and increase the vulnerability of coastal areas to climate change impacts. And in addition, the loss of vegetation leads to the conversion of these habitats to being a CO2 sink to act as a CO2 source, more or less like fires in terrestrial forests. On the contrary, the restoration of these habitats provide an opportunity to enhance resilience to climate change in coastal areas while contributing to climate change mitigation and also generating the multiple other ecosystem services these habitats provide. So within this context is where this project is designed. This project is funded by the European Union LIFE program within the specific goal on climate change adaptation. It started in 2019, and lasts 5 years, and it has 4 partners from 3 different European regions in Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands, and includes 1 municipality in Portugal, and it involves 5 different estuaries. These are the estuaries of study, so 1 in the Netherlands, the Western Scheldt, 3 in Cantabria, at the north of Spain, and 1 estuary in Portugal. So the project has, or the general goal is to demonstrate that conservation and restoration of European estuaries is or can be an efficient strategy for adaptation to climate change, decreasing the risk associated to climate change in coastal areas while contributing to climate change mitigation. So this goal is achieved through different specific goals, and today my talk is going to be more focused on how we have addressed the first goal, which is related to the assessment and the generation of tools to estimate the climate change services provided by estuarine ecosystems. So what we did first was to produce a very detailed cartography of the different habitats that we have in the different estuaries of study. In this slide, you can see an example of the 3 estuaries from Cantabria here in the north of Spain. So we mapped the different habitats, but also we mapped artificial barriers to the natural tidal range, which is very typical in European estuaries, no? And also the presence of invasive species. Then what we did was try to assess this carbon sink capacity. And for doing so, we conducted an extensive sampling of soil cores across different saltmarsh communities, tidal flats, and seagrass meadows distributed at different locations within each estuary. We sampled a total of 136 soil cores from different communities, and through different biogeochemical properties and the dating of some of these cores, we measured top 30 centimeters soil carbon stocks, carbon burial rates, and sediment vertical accretion rates. Now I'm going to show you quickly some of the main trends and results that we found in the estuaries of in the European estuaries we have examined. So first we found that the higher carbon stocks are allocated in large marsh species like Halimione or Juncus that occupy the high marsh zone, indicating that the size and biomass of the species is determinant in the carbon stocks, no? in the capacity to storage of carbon storage. An important result that we found is that tidal flats show similar carbon stocks than seagrass meadows and low marsh communities. This result is important as I said before, the role of tidal flats as carbon sinks and storage has been traditionally neglected, no? And so it's important to highlight that these habitats also have this potential. These graphs represent different habitats, so high marsh, low marsh, mudflats, and seagrass meadows in each estuary, distributed at different locations. The brown color indicates inner estuarine sections and light yellow outer estuarine sections. What I want to show you here is that the largest carbon stocks tend to be allocated at the inner estuarine sections and decrease towards the estuary mouth. These clearly reflect the effect of the river, which is a source of organic matter and organic particles from terrestrial ecosystems also. When we look not only at the magnitude of the carbon stocks, but also the rate at which these stocks accumulate, so the carbon burial rate, we found similar results across habitats, despite the difference in biomass, no? Which indicates that the influence of the tide is highly relevant. So tide transport organic particles, and those habitats located at the lower intertidal range receive important inputs of organic particles. And when we look at the sediment vertical accretion rate, which is more or less, which gives us an idea of how these habitats are adapting to sea level rise, we found that the highest sediment accretion rate was found in seagrass meadows that are located in lower intertidal zones, again highlighting the relevance of the tide, no, as a source of particles. The average sediment accretion rate we found in our habitats is like around 2 millimeters per year, which is more or less within the range of sea level rise predicted by this area, for these areas. And this is an important result we found when we check what happens in those estuarine areas where the natural tidal flow has been restricted because they have, or they were transformed for other uses in the past, or they were used as sand ponds, and then the estuarine vegetation recovered, but still the dikes are there, so the natural tide is restricted. And we found that both the carbon burial rate and the sediment vertical accretion rate are reduced where the tide is restricted. Okay, so that means that natural tidal flow is key for carbon sequestration and sediment vertical accretion in estuarine habitats. Now I'm going to move very quickly to some of the results we have obtained related to the measurement of coastal protection services provided by these habitats. Coastal protection has been measured through modeling, considering the different hydrodynamics in each estuary, the habitat distribution, and vegetation parameters such as coefficient of friction, density, or height. I have to say that this work has been developed by a colleague, not by me, so I won't go into much technical details about the methodology, just want to show you some results very quickly. So, oops. I think I had a problem. I didn't. Sorry.
All good?
I think I had a problem with my presentation. I wasn't changing the slides, no?
Okay. Yeah, it got inertia, you mean, no?
Oh my God. Yeah.
No problem. You can go if you
I
cannot go back.
I don't know when I was really sorry.
No problem.
Okay, well,
Sorry,
here,
it was very clear. No.
Yeah, yeah.
was it clear?
Yes, it was
Okay.
good.
Oh my God. Okay, so
No problem, Inés.
sorry about that. Well, I was saying no that I was gonna show you some of the results related to the coastal protection service measurements. So the methodology is quite complex, but it involves modeling and considering the different hydrodynamics, different vegetation characteristics, and so on. Now I'm going to show you very quickly some of the results. So here at this figure in the left is the distribution of the different vegetation in one estuary, and at the right is the difference in velocity, water velocity, considering when there is vegetation or when there is no vegetation. And what we can see basically is that where there is vegetation, the water velocity is reduced. And this effect is mainly observed or is higher at the estuary mouth, okay? So the effect of the vegetation reducing the water flow is higher at the estuary mouth. And this figure represents the water level measured at different points within the estuary. So from point 1 to point 4, we move from more outer estuarine sections to more inner estuarine sections. And what we can see here is that as we move into inner estuary sections towards points like 2, 3, and 4, the effect of vegetation is higher. We see how water level changes with vegetation are lower, and at that time, the time required for the tide to empty is higher. That means that vegetation reduces again the effect of the tide at increasing the water level, and this effect is higher when we move inner, or when we move into the inner estuarine sections. Okay. Sorry about that, about the problem with the slides. I don't know what happened. If you have any questions,
No
maybe
problem.
I should go to the presentation again.
No problem, Isa. No problem. You see, we tried everything yesterday, and then something always happened. Doesn't matter at all. We are all very aware about this, and the presentation was very interesting. So don't worry at all. And I'm sure we will have questions, but I have already some questions for you, but I will wait after the Lorenzo presentation. So please, Lorenzo, the floor is yours. Lorenzo, you're muted.
Do you see my presentation? Okay.
Yes.
First of all, thanks for the invitation. I'm Lorenzo Merotto. I'm a scientific technician in Portofino MPA. My main field of work and study is on climate change. Indeed, I have the privilege to be in the climate change task force formed by EUROPARC. And often I work with EUROPARC for the climate change. Today, I was not talking. I will not talking about the climate change and, for example, some of the issues of the climate change, but one of the mitigation strategy for this problem. So the context is the Portofino MPA. Portofino MPA is in the north of Italy, 40 kilometers far from Genoa, and in the Ligurian Sea. It was the third smallest MPA in Italy with 346 hectares. The coast morphology, as you can see in the picture, is a cliff that continue under the water. So we have a really rich rocky bottom, coralligenous, that is our main habitat, let's say this, and seagrass meadows. Concerning the rocky bottoms, that is along all the coast of our MPA. We did some study in a project, an interreg project that is MPA Engage. We did the evaluation of the vulnerability assessment on climate change of some of the main habitats of the MPA, and also of the main species, with a forecast in the worst scenario in 2100. In another project, we did also a evaluation of the natural capital of the main habitat of the MPA. As you can see, they provide ecosystem services for several million euro per year. And in this series of species, as you can see, there are the Schistosera species with an high vulnerability. Not very high, but high. So it's not. It will not be in a very good situation in the next year. To mitigate the climate change effect, there are different ways. The main way is to do some activity to make that the main habitat are more healthy in general, to be more resilient and less sensitive to climate change. The two main way are the implementation of protection measure, so avoid the direct impact of the anthropic activities on the habitat, and the restoration Today I will focus on restoration with our project, life project, focused on the rocky habitat. So in the intertidal zone, more or less. As you can see, the first project that we are partner is a project called Rock Pop Life, focused on Schistosera species that maybe some of you know. This species is a brown seaweed, brown algae that form a coastal forest, and as all the forest, as all the seagrass forest, this is a biodiversity reserve. This kind of species is treated by pollution, changing coastline, climate change, and the climate change have the effect on the life cycles of these species. How does it work? This project? This project is work in parallel in Ligurian Sea and in the High Adriatic Sea. There are 2 donor sites, 2 receiving sites, and 2 universities that work with the restoration activity. For this activity within this project, we are the donor sites. So we don't have problem with Schistosera because we have, and we give Schistosera to Cinque Terre MPA. From the other side, the Strunian Marine National Park in Slovenia give the algae to Miramare, but not give the adults, but with a technique called ex situ outplanting, the organism of the donor sites are not damaged. How it's work? This is some picture of the field activity. In this case, we have the University of Genoa from the Ligurian sites that monitor the states of the fertility status of the Schistosera, and once mature, they take the fertilapis of the adults, and in this way, only a part of the, let's say, plant, it's an algae, but let's say plant, are removed without any damage for the community of the donor sites. Then in the laboratory, the researcher clean the apex from the, for example, from the grazer, the micrograzer, and when there are no treat for the new individuals, they make the fertilization in making in contact the different apis of this algae. At the time, once the fertilization was happened, the new individuals are settled on these discs that are made of like I don't know now. I don't know in English. Maybe left, but when you see the material is more simple. Then they are put in ideal condition for the growth, and also to be reintroduced into the receiving sites, because that is very important to work in order to don't have a very huge difference between the laboratory condition and the receiving sites condition. When the juveniles are quite big, are sufficient big, they are put in the receiving sites in this way. So we don't use glue or something else. We we attack the disc with a fisher. And as you can see, after this is in Cinque Terre MPA, as you can see, in 1 year, in 1 year and 2 years, the new individuals of Cistosera are perfectly integrated and grow on the new substrate. And after 1 year, we see that these new individuals are fertile. So the restoration works, and in Cinque Terre we restore, if I don't wrong, something like 650 meters of coast. So it's a good, very good results. The other project also in this, let's say, bathymetry in this part of the coast is Relife. In this project, we are the leader, and the aim of this project is to restore the population of Batalla ferrugina in Liguria and MPA. Batalla ferrugina is a gastrop mollusk that is almost extinct on the Ligurian coast, mainly for the human consumption, and also for the complicated cycle of life. The other limpets have a more simple life cycle, and these are protected species. So in this case, we take the eddus from Tavolara in Sardinia. We transport to Camogli, that is one of the municipality of Portofino and PA. And in this case, the adults were removed by the donor sites. And with some, in the hatchery in Camogli, with some stimulation by the researcher, the organism start to the emission of the gametes and then the fertilization. Then, if all goes well, we have different larvae, a lot of larvae, and then that start the metamorphosis until the settlement and the first juvenile of the patella. When they are sufficiently big, they have been moved in in the A zone of the MPA, so the not take and don't not entry zone. So in a protected, the most protected part of the MPA, with these tiles in stone. And after time, because it's difficult, week, maybe sometimes month, they move outside the tiles and they go in the natural environment. So this is the methodics, and I can say that the Relife project, from technical point of view, is is more difficult than the one on Cistosera, because we have animal with a very high mortality in the first larval stage. So we had some problem in the first years of the project to have a good fertilization and also a good survival of the new individuals. Anyway, to restart from the beginning, I say that a good status of the environment, a good status of the habitat, make it less sensitive and more resilient to climate change. Indeed, this is the analysis done in the receiving site for Cistoseira. In this case, Amentacia will work on two projects, on two species of Cistoseira Amentacia that maybe now change name in Cistoseira ericaria. And we did this ecological quality index, and we see that after the restoration, we level up in the level of ecological quality. Indeed, we pass from good to high. In other conclusion, in general, is better to the prevention, so to avoid the impact and to avoid that lose the habitat. But if it's too late, the only solution maybe is to restore. I know that a lot of researchers don't think in this way, but if we want to maintain the ecological, also the ecosystem services, we have to do so. So thank you, and I hope to be in time. Thank you.
Fantastic, perfect. Thank you very much. Amazing, the two projects, very inspiring, very interesting. So we have already two questions, and maybe participants are thinking, are digesting the whole information, and more questions will come. So the first one that I saw, I think, yes, it was for Ines. A question by Mirna. Ines, how can we get more information about the methodologies and results to emulate and compare at other sites, such Lebanon? Fantastic.
Okay. Well, these results will be available in the webpage of the LIFE project, the LIFE Adaptablus project. They will be gathered in a deliverable, showing like both the methodology we have used, like very detailed, and the results. And also there is another LIFE project that I think is very interesting, more focused on the carbon sink capacity of these habitats, not coastal protection. It's already finished. It's called LIFE Blue Natura. I will send the link, and they have also measured carbon sequestration and carbon stocks in seagrass meadows and salt marshes in Andalusia, in the south of Spain. And we follow more or less the same methodology than in that LIFE project. And they have also produced very interesting like technical reports and methodologies, and also a manual of how to create a blue carbon project, which means that a project where it's like a carbon compensation project. So how to, which is a way also to get funds to protect and to restore, no? Like, and I think it's interesting for marine protected areas too. Like, it's a way to get funds to protect and restore, based on like companies that want to compensate for their emissions, like always voluntary compensation schemes, no? But I think it's interesting as a way to get funds for restoration and conservation. So I will send the links to this, to our project, and also to this other project. And I think it also has very interesting tools.
Super, Ines. Yes, please put the link in the chat.
Yeah.
So, and now another question I get from Francesca, I guess is for Lorenzo. Sorry, I lost it. Where was here? So how did you measure the ecological quality indicator, Lorenzo?
Okay, it's a question that for me is difficult to answer, because it's a study that do the University of Genoa. Anyway, I can link to you one of the work done in the framework of Rockpop, that I think that you can find all the information here, because are very technical and very from researcher. As MPA staff, I use only the final results, and for the calculation, let's go the researcher.
Perfect. That will be my last question from both of you, is how do you see the relation between researchers and managers? Because you are exactly one researcher and one manager. But this is the last question for you. Before, I would like that you answer to the questions in the chat. My colleague Teresa is asking to Ines, what exotic species do you find in Cantabrian estuary?
Yeah.
And how they affect?
Okay, so what we find in our estuaries is a shrub species called Baccharis alimifolia, which is like a small tree, and it invades estuary areas that had been enclosed by a dike or semi-enclosed, where tidal is partially restricted. So where we have any sort of like barrier to natural tidal flow, so salinity gets lower at the inner estuarine sections, and then these species expand. So in these areas, like the landscape changes completely, because they don't look as an estuary anymore, even if, so you have a mix of estuarine species like high marsh communities and also these small trees. But we call it like, we say that it is like it become like land, not like terrestrial land. It's and in these areas, for instance, for the climate change services that we are measuring in this project, what we find is sometimes the carbon stocks in these areas are high, because we are speaking about a big species, no? This invasive shrub. So maybe the carbon stocks in the soil are high, but the rate at which these areas accreate vertically is very low, because you don't have the influence of the tide. So it completely changed the landscape. And a way to restore these areas is usually removing these species, like manually, but also restoring the natural tidal flow. That's the most important thing to do to eliminate these species. The best way to fight against these species is just recovering the natural tide and the natural salinity.
Yeah, that is a very big issue, how to manage, how to accept, how to eliminate the invasive species, how to reduce. It's a very, very hot topic. Another question to Lorenzo from Tim. Has MPA protection or restoration had any impact on local fishermen? Very important. And if so, how have these been managed? I know that Portofino works very well with the fishermen.
Yeah, it depends the type of fishermen, because with recreational fishermen, with artisanal fishermen, we have a good relationship. And in that case, with this category, with small-scale fishermen, or small-scale fisheries, this activity, in this case with this species, doesn't have a huge impact, because we are working in the area of the intertidal zone. So yes, maybe some species have some influence on the sea web, the food web, but there is not a huge impact on the other habitat. For example, on Posidonia oceanica, on coralligenous habitat, some effect can be of the restoration can be big, very bigger. From this, so with them there is no impact and no problems. On the recreational fishermen is more tricky because with them we have a worse relationship in general. And in the case of the Batalla ferrugina, for example, one of the main problems, one of the causes of their more or less extinction were the recreational fishermen that use that species as bait, so for hook, for fishing. And that kind of we have the restriction obviously in the MPA, but in some zone they can walk in that zone. So it's more difficult with them from all point of view, and also from this. What we can do is to raise awareness in them. Because if now the patella is present in a zone that they cannot reach, but in the future our aim is to have a good population of patella, and it's difficult to do surveillance on this species. Is also difficult in more apparent species. In a species that is high mimetic like this is a big effort. So we have to raise awareness with them and with the species. Yeah,
definitely awareness is crucial. My colleague Teresa saw, as I saw the fantastic Pinna nobilis in your slide, Lorenzo. So yeah, we would like to know how is the situation of this fantastic.
I have the privilege to see an extinction in real time, because we finish our monitoring our routinary monitoring in the July of 2018. And with more or less all the specimen alive. And in September started this huge mortality. And at the mid of October, we had from 35 to 50% of dead individuals. And then at the end of October arrived these huge wave storms that destroy also harbor, make very disaster, and erase completely the Pinna nobilis population. So they work jointly with the Haplosporidium pinne. And from 2018, every year we do the same monitoring in the same area where the population were more numerous. And for now, we don't have a sign of recovery. Anyway, there are at least one here in Liguria, one life project on the restoration of Pinna nobilis that we hope that will be. Now it's just started, and we hope that in the next year we had some good news.
Fantastic. Some time ago, I had also the privilege to see, surprising privilege to see a lot of Pinna nobilis in Corsica. That is very interesting.
In the north, in the north of Corsica.
No, in all coast. So it was very interesting, just a piece of information for you. So now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Isa, because she had a very interesting question and I will add something about it. Isa, open your microphone and ask your question.
Oh, thank you. Nice that I can ask my question on camera. No, I was wondering, Lorenzo, because Ines, you mentioned some of the direct effects of the terrestrial environment on her site. Do you also see them on your side, and do you know how to counteract them? If so.
Yeah.
Before Lorenzo, just a piece, another comment from my side, because I like very much this question, because it's a part of the debate in Brussels. What we try to to say in the debates is always that I think we need to start to avoid this strong separation between sea policies and land policies, because it's stupid. What happened in the land affects so much what happened in the sea and vice versa. So for example, about the agriculture policy, common policies, it's something that is land, but what happened in the agriculture is absolutely crucial for the sea. So thank you for telling us your thought about this.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's a very interesting question. In general, in this specific case of Schistosera or Batalla, I think that there is no influence of marine habitat for this habitat on the terrestrial part. But for sure, there is the impact of the terrestrial part on this kind of habitat, because yeah, there is the climate change, there is the fishermen that eat the patella or use as bait. But the problem is, first of all, the pollution. And so we are in an area with a lot of anthropogenic impact, with a lot of city, small city that in the summer become big city. They quintuple their population in for 3-4 months. As you can imagine, the savage system is not measured to this quantity of people. And so first of all, the sedimentation and the modification of the coastline. For example, in the case I see a question after about the reason that in the Cinque Terre National Park the Schistosera was disappeared. So there are some reasons that there are a lot of sedimentation. There are the climate change, because, for example, also on the Adriatic side, the problem is that for years the Schistosera, for the changing in the environment, doesn't be fertile. So for many years it doesn't reproduce for in a sexual way. So there are I think that the climate change is guidelines for all the impact, but in the case of this habitat and more on Posidonia meadows, seagrass meadows, the effect of what happened on the land, so the fertilization, the savage, also the sedimentation, have a huge impact on the ecosystem. So the Posidonia more than the Schistosera, I think. There are a lot of factors that sum and work in synergy and have a very huge damage.
Yeah, definitely. Also, as you mentioned, urbanization and good management of cities is crucial for to protect our seas. I would like to know if Ines wants to add something about this connection of land and sea.
Yes, actually, I didn't show these results, but some of the things we found here is that the patterns of land use within the basins, like in the river basins of each of the estuaries, had an effect on the carbon stocks in the estuary habitats. And in general, what we found is that when the percentage of forest and natural land is higher in the river basin, then carbon stocks are higher in the estuarine habitats. Mm-hmm. Whereas when the percentage of artificial land is higher in the river basins, then that was translated into lower carbon stocks in the estuarine habitats, which I think is related to the input of terrestrial organic matter through the rivers, which is an important factor, no, for carbon sequestration. But yeah, we also found a relationship, no, between what was happening in the land upwards in the river and then in the estuary. So yeah, everything is connected. For management, we have to.
Exactly. We try to separate things because we need it, but things are not separated.
Yeah.
Everything is connected, definitely. Another question to Ines. Fernando, would you like to ask directly, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stefania. Hi, Ines. So my question is in regards of the effect of storms or the sea action, the physical action that the sea can have on carbon sinks. So do you have information if, for example, a storm can wash out the sediment or the carbon that has been stored in the sink, or either a sea storm or the effect of the tides, any factor, any physical factor that can affect the carbon sinks, and as a consequence, should they be protected to avoid this physical effect?
I think, or from my experience, or what I've seen so far, is when you have the vegetation, when you have the habitat, the vegetation protects the sediment, no? When you have like storms and waves. So when the ecosystem is healthy and the vegetation is there, it doesn't really affect. I mean, you have to have like a really big storm and something like really, but in normal conditions, nothing happens. But when you lost the vegetation because, I don't know, maybe, well, this is something typical in seagrass meadows, like you have like a heat wave and then you lose the vegetation, you lose the canopy, then is when you can have like an impact in the sediment through storms or like waves, water currents, and then is when you erode the carbon stocks and all this carbon that was in anoxic conditions, like protected, no, from bacterial action and so on, gets exposed to oxygen, and is when it decomposes and becomes CO2 again. But as I said, when vegetation is there, the sediment is protected.
Okay.
But this is a reason why, for instance, tidal floods are much more dynamic systems than salt marshes, no? Because they don't have vegetation. So sometimes, as they're high, like under a higher hydro period, like more and more frequently inundated by the tide, then sometimes deposition of carbon is higher, but also erosion is higher. So it's a more dynamic. But I think when habitats have vegetation, then everything is more stable and protected.
Yeah, so there is no need or no action to protect these habitats.
No, I would say that protecting like with a barrier and things like that, I think it actually reduces their capacity to sequester from what I've seen so far.
Interesting, thank you. I will collect some questions, technical questions for Lorenzo. So Teresa is asking if you always use juvenile of all species to transplant, or do you transplant also adults? Fernando wants to know if, even if you mentioned already the rate of success of the replantation of Schistosphera species and Batalla ferrugina. And I saw another question here again for Lorenzo. Ines was asking to Lorenzo the factor driving Schistosphera lost in the restoration site.
Okay, so starting from the first, the juveniles. Yes, in for both the project, yes. In one case, from Tavolara, we take the adults, but in the natural environment, we put the juveniles. and but also the adults, because when they have only the difference between this species and another that is, for example, Patella cerulea, that is more common, is very common on the Italian Mediterranean coast, is that the Patella cerulea have a lot of reproductive events in the year. Patella ferrugina have only one in November, more or less. So the adults at that point, we have to put the adults in the natural environment in order to make them mature. Then we take into the laboratory, but we don't introduce the adults in order to repopulate. For the repopulation, we use only the juveniles. And for Patella ferrugina, we start now to do the restoration, the reintroducing activity, because in the first year of the project we had the problem with the reproduction and with the survival of the juveniles and the larvae. Now we have more or less 115 individuals that in this period start to be put in the environment, and in this period we have also another reproductive events. So we hope to start to make this methodology that work well. There are some scientific papers on this methodology developed in this project. And so now we understand the way to reproduce and make them survive. And the idea is to capitalize also in other project with that we had submitted 1 month ago in another life project, the sequel of Relife. And so for now we have 115 new individuals of Patella ferrugina. For Schistosera, if I don't wrong, in these years, because it was more simple, we had 200,000 new juveniles planted in the Cinque Terre National Park. So a huge number, but with the algae is a little bit more simple. And I don't remember the other questions. I don't know if I answered the question, Dan, for now.
The last question was from Ines. What was the factor driving Schistosera lost?
Okay. Yeah. For Cinque Terre is maybe the sedimentation, the change in the habitat. So maybe also climate change, but Portofino and Cinque Terre are not really far. They are 40-60 kilometers far, so it's not a big distance. I think that is more for the impact of the river, because there is a big river near Cinque Terre, so the sedimentation. And in the Adriatic Park also sedimentation, but for sure in the last 2 years the maturity rate of the Schistosera population in the donor site was very low. So in the donor site the situation was that, and in the other area, if the Schistosera is disappearing or very few, the low fertility, the low maturity rate increase their extinction with all the other factors. Okay. But it's very difficult because there are a lot of factors that sum each other.
Anyway, both of projects are a fantastic website I saw, so you can find a lot of information directly in the website of the project. So we are arriving to the conclusion, but before there is a very interesting comment and contribution from Mirna from Lebanon. I'm delighted to see people from Lebanon and from outside Europe to attend our webinar. She says that as a friend of nature, NGO, sorry, in Lebanon, they are employed artificial reef for marine restoration, and they are working on marine conservation. There are the links in the chat, so please have a look to the links. And they also are interested, because I saw a question for me, interested to have contact for projects, for future collaborations, etc. As EUROPARC, we don't provide directly these links, but what we do is exactly to create the networking occasions and events. So please have a look to the Mirna links, take contact to them. Mirna, if you want to put your contact email in the chat, please feel free to do it. Don't hesitate to contact our colleague Neil also for the project. Maybe also he can provide you some ideas, contacts, etc. EUROPARC is here for that. And don't hesitate to attend to other events, webinars. Next year we will organize several events connected with marine, probably. So last, I think, yes, sorry, Neil, you had a question from both for both speakers, and in some way is connected also to my question. So I suggest to conclude with the two questions. So the first is, what would you say are the main management challenges you have encountered in your work, and how can these management challenges be addressed, do you think? And this is exactly what the project of Neil will try to not to solve, but provide the solutions and help and support. So your answer is very important for us. And again, how do you see the relation between science and management? How we can improve it if it needed to improve? And so tell us your ideas. But really 5 minutes. Nice. Ines.
Should I start? Okay. So the main challenges in our areas of study, which are estuaries, I think, is that most estuaries in Europe have like claimed areas, no? That areas that have been transformed to other uses. So estuaries have lost like at least some of their original area has been transformed to other uses. And all these areas have a different degree of transformation. Some of them are already urban areas, no? Or some other are agricultural land, whatever. So the main challenge is to recover those areas that could be recovered. Some areas cannot be recovered. I mean, some areas are, in Santander, for instance, the airport is built on an area that used to be the estuary of the Bay of Santander a few years ago. So this area is not possibly, it's not possible to be recovered, but other areas, yes, but they just own to people or so. From the legal perspective, it's difficult to reclaim these areas, and also to compensate economically to the owners. So managers of, in our cases, these Natura 2000 areas don't have neither the funds to recover these areas. So I think it's the most important challenge, how to get these areas back to the estuary from a legal and also perspective, but also how to do it, how to pay for them, no? That's one point. And regarding the question between the relationship between managers and researchers, I think, or from my point of view, I think it's great, or the best for me. The best is that what I do can be applied or used, no? So I think sometimes maybe we need to communicate more to know what do you need, no? What we were saying yesterday, maybe sometimes researchers maybe just get a lot of data or produce a lot of data, but maybe these data are not so useful for managers. We need to give response to the needs, no, of managers to solve like problems, in real problems, like actual problems.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Lorenzo, 2 minutes to answer to these big questions.
Starting from the last, so the relationship between MPA managers and researcher, I can say I am not an MPA manager, because I think that if the MPA manager were all scientific people, was a lot of simple, and the decision can be good, but often the real MPA manager are politicians, are administrative, so they doesn't care a lot of so in Italy in particular, of the good manage of an MPA of a park. But let's say that I am an MPA manager. For me, the work with the researcher is absolutely fundamental, because I take also data, but the work done by a researcher are work that we are not able to do. For example, we use the correlate results, but I don't know how to do a correlate analysis. So first of all, this. So their data are useful for the management activity, and they are a good tool, a fundamental tool also for talk with all the stakeholders. So in my case, we work mainly with the University of Genoa, and with more or less all the researcher of University of Genoa. The relationship is very good, and sometimes we are friends. So this is the situation. But as I say, I'm the scientific staff. I can speak about some measure, but I'm not the MPA manager. Maybe have to be a measure of one of the municipality to be the MPA manager. From the other side, I think that Ines take the problem of the management, because we do restoration activities, but we have to work and go to search for funds in European Union with project. We don't have for now money for the ministry, but also for the stand in Italy. In Italy, in the other part, I don't know, but in Italy we don't have money for the scientific staff of the MPA. That I think that is the engine of the MPA that works well, and so we have to search money in Europe to do all activity. We are in 3 scientific staff, and we have 6 European projects. So this is the problem of the management. And I know that is not a question of Portofino MPA, for sure is in all the Italian MPA, and I think also in other part of Europe and the Mediterranean.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Neil, I see that you would like to say something.
Very quickly, thank you, Stefania, and thank you, Lorenzo, and thank you, Ines, for your really articulate answers. From the Mediterranean MPA Forum a couple of weeks ago, you've both echoed exactly what they were saying, the need for more holistic solutions, where you're working with different types of user of marine protected areas. So in the neighborhood or in the surroundings of the marine protected area. Also, then we need to stop thinking in terms of silos. We need to work in more collaborative ways between the research, the scientific, and the management communities. And that's important in order to develop these holistic solutions that are clearly needed, especially when the management challenges are so involved. One thing affects another. So how do we develop these holistic management approaches and work in better integrated ways? So I think if we can find the key to that, we will certainly make good progress. But fantastic projects. Thank you very much for sharing them.
Thank you, Neil. So please don't hesitate to contact Neil for the project. That is really will produce a lot of interesting material, and everybody is welcome to collaborate with us. So last minute to say, please fill this short survey to say to help us to improve our webinars. And before to ask Fernando to open the microphone, so everybody will say Merry Christmas in his own languages to everybody, I would like to say something very important. I would like to thank Isa from, because Isa is still for 2 weeks, 1 week more or less, still our intern in Brussels. She made a great work. Her topic is marine, so I really wish to Isa to continue in this topic, and probably you will see her as a manager of one marine protected areas in the future, or researcher, maybe presenting us some fantastic project or good research. And thank you very much, Isa, for organizing this webinar, because it was her, her last task. And thank you to everyone for being with us. Okay, and Fernando, let us open our microphone.
Yes, you can open your microphones to send greetings and say goodbye, and well, Happy Christmas, Happy New Year to everyone. So if you want to unmute yourselves, feel free, please.
Happy Christmas!
Merry Christmas!
Happy Christmas!
And happy birthday, Stefania!
And happy birthday, Stefania! Definitely.
Merry Christmas!
Bye bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Isa. Thank you very much.
Goodbye. Also, remember that the recordings will be available soon in EUROPARC website. So feel free to review the webinar or send it to your colleagues. Okay.
Thank you for your questions and everything. Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.